Hello, welcome back to the Fruit of Grisaia. I am into this, I just want to know where it is going. In television dramas and such, fugitives on the run or from something or other often head straight for the sleepiest stretch of countryside they can find. The basic idea is that less people means less opportunities for someone to see you, but 9 times out of 10, that's a downright terrible strategy. An outsider suddenly showing up in a tiny, close-knit community stands out like the proverbial sore thumb. As anyone who's read a decently plotted mystery novel can tell you, hide a leaf among leaves and a corpse among corpses. And when you're looking for a place with a high population that offers convenient opportunities for under-the-table employment, the metropolitan area is the obvious choice. Great. Good to know. When you're hiding a person, do it among people. That's one lesson I learned not from my master, but through painful personal experience. The day's work finished up right on schedule. I walked the road home at a steady pace, a bag of deep-fried food from one of my new coworkers dangling from one hand. This town, about an hour by train from the heart of Tokyo, used to be one of the old-school red light districts back in the day. Even now that it's been cleaned up, the atmosphere is still a little on the seedy side. Anybody would get lost on their first trip through this warren of narrow streets and tangled alleyways. Not the most convenient town to lead a normal life in, but right now it's exactly what we need. Nothing seems off today either. With small movements of my eyes, I observe the appearances and behavior of the people around me. Apart from checking for possible surveillance personnel, I'm looking for changes in the neighborhood shops and restaurants. Anything even slightly different from yesterday warrants careful scrutiny. Although it's pure habit by now, this still involves a good deal of mental focus and emotional strain. Honestly pretty rough when I'm coming home physically exhausted from a long day of manual labor. Still, letting down my guard isn't an option. We're tucked away pretty discreetly here, but there are definitely people looking for us, and a single coincidence could completely overturn the status quo. Quietly repeating that fact to myself, I take yet another look around. I overwrought my memorized image from yesterday with the street before my eyes and compared the two carefully. About 15 minutes walking distance from the station, I slip through a pair of alleyways, then enter a small apartment building. There are more straightforward routes home, but I've been deliberately taking a tangled path to make life a little harder for anyone who tries to follow. After a slow, watchful climb up the stairs, I unlock the door marked 203 and enter the room. I'm back, all quiet today as well? When I open the door, I'm immediately greeted by a relieved face.
ええ、今日も何もなかったわ。
Confirming that Yumiko is present and well, I finally allow myself to relax a little. Alright, good to hear. Taking off my shoes, I hand over the sack with the fried food. Got another present from Sawai-san. Can you get out the plates?
いつもの人ね。こっちは何も返せないのに、なんだか悪いわ。
Well, as far as they know, I'm living alone, and I don't eat that much at lunch. Guess they're a little worried about my diet.
親切な人が多いのね、あなたの職場には。
They're a little on the rough side, but yeah, you aren't wrong. After leaving my bag on the floor, I head for the kitchen area. I'll warm it up and throw something together.
ええ、わかったわ。
The cold water falling onto my hands feels like a sign of the changing seasons. Autumn may linger a while longer by the calendar, but soon it'll be winter in all but name. That you, Amane? Yeah, I got Sakaki out of there. Sorry about the hassle. I'll be getting in touch again at some point, but I had Sakaki throw her cell away. Keep in mind we won't be able to answer calls from you for the moment. Also, tell Sachi I'm sorry about the bike. I'll compensate her as soon as I get the chance. Alright, hanging up now.
スオさん？
Yeah, the others made some real contributions to the rescue operation.
そう。また私、みんなに。
This isn't the time to be feeling guilty. For the moment, let's just focus on getting ourselves somewhere where they can't track us down. I've made some preparations for a rainy day scenario. We'll stop by there first. Still pulling Yumiko along, I looked over to meet her eyes. Don't worry, it's going to be alright. Trust me. She answered while squeezing my hand powerfully in hers.
連れ去られましたで済む問題か。ヘリや飛行機まで飛ばしながらこのざまとは、お前たちは寝ながら警護していたのか。
申し訳ございません。あの男がまさかあんな想定外の行動に出るとは思わず。
その想定外に備えるのがお前たちの仕事だろうが。もういい。さっさと探しに行け。死ぬ気で行け。
はい。
一体どうなっとるんだ、あなたたちの組織は。
申し訳ございません。当該の件につきましては、現在こちらも全力で対応に当たっております。
さっさと捕まえて殺すなりなんなりしろ。ことが大きくならないうちに早急に解決させるんだ。
一つ質問があるのですが、よろしいでしょうか。
なんだね。
どうして警察に通報なさらないのでしょうか。これは誘拐事件です。社長なら言うまでもなく警察関係者とのパイプもございます。早期解決を目指すとのことでしたら、私どもの組織や独自ルートに頼らずともその方が。
無理だと知っていて言っているのか。
いえ、私には分かりかねます。
今は会社にとっても私にとっても大切な時期だ。警察沙汰になれば必ずどこかから話は漏れる。メディアは報道管制で抑えられても妙な噂は立つだろう。そんなことになっては困るのだよ。ともかく 警察沙汰にだけはできないんだ。そんなことを言う暇があったら少しでも早く解決する方法を考えたまえ。
しかし
そもそもこれはあなたの部下がやらかした事件だろう。内部で処理するのが筋だろうが。
わかりました。最善を尽くします。
努力はせんでいい。必要なのは結果だけだ。
はい。
Our very modest dinner for the day consists of the deep fried food I brought home from work, with sides of boiled spinach and miso soup. We do have some savings from my rainy day fund, but we can't dip into it carelessly with such an uncertain future ahead of us. Our diet's gotten pretty plain as a result. Not that Yumiko's ever breathed a word of complaint. Then again, she was always scarfing down junk food when we were in the dorm, so I guess she's not the pickiest of eaters.
これがイカフライね。初めて食べるわ。
I can tell. I do seem to remember Makina telling me something about Yumiko's calamari history, or lack thereof, but I have to say, this is the first time I've seen someone examine a piece of fried squid quite this intently.
食べたことがないって言ったら寮でバカにされたのよ。
Well, congratulations on losing your fried squid virginity.
イリスさんみたいなことを言わないでちょうだい。
After those words leave Yumiko's mouth, a slightly lonely expression flits across her face.
またあの制服を着るときは来るのかしら。
Since our arrival here, those flashy school uniforms have naturally remained shut up inside our dressers. Unless we manage to get back to Miyama Academy someday, I suppose that's where they're going to stay. Do you want to?
そうね。似合ってるって言ってもらえた服だし。
If I hadn't rescued Yumiko, she would have been shipped off to some school overseas. Our old life would have disappeared whether I took action or not. There's nothing to regret.
どうしたの、風見くん。
It's nothing. Although I made some preparations for an emergency beforehand, this escape plan was still extremely reckless and dangerous. I acted boldly, assuming that the Sakaki family circumstances would prevent them from turning this into a manhunt. Still, depending on their approach to the situation, we might have ended up being caught within hours. But I couldn't bring myself to just desert Yumiko, whatever the risks. I couldn't just let her disappear and leave me with nothing but words of apology. I wanted to do something for her. Then again, that probably wasn't the only reason. I wanted to protect Yumiko. That was the single largest motive, but there was something else to it as well. Something more selfish. The women I get close to always seem to disappear. At some point, I'd grown afraid of that chain of loss, convinced myself it was a curse, a punishment of some sort. The more I started to care about Yumiko, the more I wondered if she'd follow the same pattern, and then they tried to take her away from me.
風見くん、
Yumiko tries to speak, her voice soft, but hesitates. You're reading the atmosphere, I answer before she can continue. Were you about to apologize again, Yumiko? Looks like I hit the bullseye. She lowers her head, eyes from mine, awkwardly. Thought I told you to cut it out with that.
でも私のせいで風見くんに迷惑をかけたし、今もこうして気を使わせてる。
Yumiko. I interrupt her halfway through a sentence with a slightly forcible tone. I decided to protect you, and you decided to come with me. There's nothing to be ashamed of and nothing to apologize for. Look, Yumiko, you're finally your own person now, so for the moment, why not think about yourself? I'd imagine you've got a pretty decent backlog to work through on that front. Yumiko nods firmly. Probably came off as pretty pompous there, but those words were directed at myself as much as her. What's driving me forward right now? It's absolutely true that I want to protect Yumiko and do what's best for her, and underneath those clear feelings, there's a number of hazier emotions I don't quite understand myself. When I took her out of that plane, I told her we'd search for an answer. I thought it was the word Yumiko needed to hear most after all those years lost in the fog, but I'm starting to think that applies just as much to me. Here, Yumiko, eat that one too. I can't allow my uncertainty to make Yumiko uneasy as well. For the moment, I'm going to try and keep the pensive reveries to a minimum. Oh, jeez. The forecast called for rain, but instead we're greeted with a clear and beautiful morning. Not that the weather outside has too much effect on our current lifestyle, especially in Yumiko's case. Are these all ones you finished already? I gesture at a sizable pile of hardcover books sitting at Yumiko's bedside.
もう読んでしまった後だから、風見くんが読まないのだったら返却しても構わないわ。
Yeah, alright.
何か気になることでもあったかしら。
No, I was just trying to remember when they're due back at the library.
そう？
Yumiko's currently a fugitive of sorts. Naturally, that restricts her freedom of movement. She leaves the apartment mostly at night, when few pedestrians are around, and only when I've given her the all clear, and the vast majority of her time is spent indoors. But of course, she'd go crazy just sitting around in here all day long, so I take periodic trips to the library to borrow her large quantities of books. Were these any good?
ええ、風見くんのチョイスがいいのかしらね。興味深く読んでいるものばかりだし、退屈に感じることはないわ。
It doesn't sound like Yumiko's saying that just for my sake. Probably are honest thoughts. That said, spending all this time alone must be a little rough emotionally. Yumiko was on her own more often than not, even when we were in the dorm, but she had a cell phone, easy access to the internet, and above all else, boisterous friends who kept things lively. By comparison, she's only got one antisocial man for company in this cramped apartment, and he's not even around for most of the day. There aren't many chances for us to do much of anything together. Got to start thinking about the next move pretty soon. We can't keep up this lifestyle forever. A decisive solution is going to be necessary. Not that I really know what that would look like yet. I suppose there's no choice but to cautiously observe the Sakaki family's movements and piece together a strategy. The cell phone in my breast pocket buzzes quietly only once. Ever since the kidnapping, it hasn't been doing much of that. There aren't many people who know the number. Most of them are back in the Mihama Academy dorm, and I told them in no uncertain terms not to call except in an outright emergency. Under these circumstances, there's only one plausible reason my phone would ring. Figures. Glancing at the screen, I nod to myself and get to my feet.
出かける
Yumiko doesn't know who it's from, or even that I received a message. Probably a bit disconcerting to see me get up so suddenly for no apparent reason. Yeah, just for a while.
そう
Even so, at times like these, Yumiko never asks where I'm going or why. I guess that means she trusts me, but there's still a clear shadow of unease on her face. I'll be back in an hour or so. Lightly patting her on the head, I try to offer a little reassurance. She must understand rationally that I'll be back soon enough, but it's only natural to feel a little unsettled when your only connection to the outside world vanishes. I casually descend the apartment stairs, then glance around the area as I head into an alley. After 2 quick left turns, I clamber over a rusted old gas meter and make my way down a shadowy lane to a dead end. This is the place I scouted out beforehand. It's a blind spot from pretty much any angle with very little risk of being overheard. I lean against the far wall, take one last careful look around, then finally take out my phone. JB's voice hasn't changed much since our escape. Same business-like tone as always. There's an oddly upbeat song playing in the background, though. Sounds like she's got her mini component stereo on. We're not exactly thriving, but at least we have our health.
相変わらずおじいちゃんみたいな言葉を使うのね。バイト先で言われない？年相応の喋り方しろって。
When did Ichigaya start investigating and mind reading research?
研究しなくてもわかるわよ。ひとまず冗談が言える程度には元気なようね。逃亡者の割にはだけど。
JB intersperses her retorts with heavy, exasperated sighs. This incident has, of course, been an enormous nuisance for her as my boss. The case officer bears ultimate responsibility for their agent's actions. She's temporarily demoted until the matter is resolved, and they went so far as to set up an internal investigation to determine if she was conspiring with me. In the end, they decided I acted alone and cleared JB's name. That's the only reason she's even able to talk to me like this. Of course, I'm still using my untraceable phone with its encrypted connection for these chats. To be honest, a few hours of groveling at her feet wouldn't really cut it at this point, but there's no point worrying about paying her back until I stop running up the tab. Yeah, I guess I'm starting to get the hang of this manual labor thing. Anyway, to what do I owe the pleasure?
いつも通りよ。風見雄二への説得。いつまでもこんなことを続けていても仕方ないんだから、早く投稿しなさい。それが身のためよ。
A tempting suggestion, but unfortunately I'm otherwise engaged at the moment. Should have made your offer earlier.
あら、今でも変更は可能よ。キャンセルの手続きは私がしてあげるわ。
Sorry, but I'm not a big fan of changing horses midstream. Let's drop the subject, shall we?
そういえば、ユージの部屋にあったサボテン、そろそろ虫食いにあってもいい頃合いなんだけど、どうなのかしら。あら、どうしたの？
Nothing. Leave the cactus alone. I'm pretty sure it's insect free.
はい、了解。さっきの件、心変わりするようならいつでも連絡してね。それじゃ。
JB promptly hangs up on me in typically efficient style. I flip the cell phone shut. No movements at present. The main meaning of that formulaic conversation lay in the music playing in the background. We have a simple system where the genre of song communicates some basic information. Today, it was a bossa nova Hawaiian beat arrangement, meaning Ichigaya's search is continuing with no apparent progress. No imminent threats, but we can't let our guard down. Now that her name's been cleared, she's probably no longer under surveillance, but JB's a straight-laced military type with a powerful respect for authority. She's not capable of casually leaking me detailed information. So instead, she gives me small hints using this sort of indirect method. I really am due for one marathon groveling session when this is all over. Seriously, though, JB, what kind of a question was that? Her casual query about my cactus at the end there took me by surprise. I've never owned such a plant in my life. It was a clear reference to the prickly individual currently sharing my room. And as for a weren't even, that should probably go without saying. Well, guess it wouldn't be too strange to interpret it that way. Whatever the circumstances may be, I'm a man and Yumiko's a woman. We ran away hand in hand. We're living together. It's not hard to see why someone might imagine something along those lines. For a woman of JB's age and personality, it probably seems like the natural assumption to make. Still, the fact of the matter is nothing's happened between us. It's questionable whether Yumiko's interested in being eaten by anyone, and more fundamentally, I don't have a clear sense of how she feels about me. At the very least, I think she trusts me. Thanks to JB's unnecessary prying, I've got a new question weighing slightly on my mind. The room's silent except for the irregular clacking of our chopsticks. Yumiko's never been the type to chatter on and on while she eats. In fact, she seems to make an effort to be as quiet as possible at the table. Probably has something to do with that good breeding of hers. I tend not to talk too much during meals myself, but today my silence is deliberate. In other words, instead of trying to make conversation, I'm focusing my thoughts on the matter from this afternoon. What exactly does Yumiko think of me? It's like something a middle schooler would be worrying about. That said, considering our very intimate living circumstances, the presence or absence of romantic feelings is a serious matter. If I jumped to a mistaken conclusion, I couldn't end up making Yumiko feel deeply uncomfortable in the one refuge she has left. I need to proceed very carefully. Still, guess it couldn't hurt to ask. There's something I've been wondering about that seems tangentially related to the question at hand. Seems like a good place to begin. Hey, Yumiko.
何かしら風見くん。
Why are you still using my last name? Yumiko's chopsticks stopped dead midair. Her pupils shrinking suddenly inside wide open eyes. Not a complicated question, right? Just wondering why you've never called me Yuuji. I'm consistently using the intimate first name with Yumiko, but she's still going with Kazami-kun. Is that an implicit signal not to try and get me closer? Does it have some other meaning? Knowing that might give me an answer to the more sensitive question I've been pondering. Unfortunately, Yumiko appears to have frozen solid. For a good 5 seconds, she just stares at me. Finally, as if remembering to move, she begins to flop her mouth slightly open and closed like a goldfish. The words that finally emerged from her mouth are far from the conclusive reply I was hoping for.
なんというか、まだというか、その、
Staring down at her omelet as she pokes at it with her chopsticks, she mumbles vague non-answers.
でもどうしてあなたは急にそんなことを聞いたの？
Yumiko abruptly pivots to a question of her own in an attempt to regain control of the conversation. Being honest with her at this point would probably be a mistake. No reason in particular, just a little curious. What's wrong? Were you expecting something else?
いえ、別にそうではないわ。あなたはいつもそうよね。
Yumiko's slightly flushed face pulls back to its original distance, her expression changing to one of restrained anger. The omelet she was fiddling with has been thoroughly dissected into a few miserable yellow chunks. And in the end, I didn't even get an answer to my question. That reaction was just too ambiguous. From one angle, it looks like Yumiko's actively hiding romantic feelings for me, but you could also interpret it as an attempt to deflect my interest. To be perfectly honest, I'm not the most perceptive man alive when it comes to these matters. Analyzing Yumiko's feelings based off that conversation is far beyond my meager capabilities. Quietly slurping down my miso soup, I glance over at the young woman in question. She's still got an irritable expression on her face. I don't quite understand the thought process, but if she's displeased with me for trying to upset the status quo, I guess she isn't interested for the moment. That night, even after turning out the lights and slipping under my blanket, I couldn't manage to fall asleep. Yumiko's sleeping at my side as always, but as I watch, her regular peaceful breathing begins to change slightly. Every once in a while, Yumiko grimaces and moans softly in her sleep. Might be some sort of nightmare. Sometimes it sounds like she's trying to speak, although the words aren't intelligible. Don't worry, Yumiko. I gently touch her forehead, then stroke my hand up through her hair. Her expression seems to soften a little. Maybe the words brought her some relief. My own feelings had been an open question to me for some time, but as I look down at Yumiko's face, I can feel something like an answer emerge. The girl's definitely special to me. That vague desire to keep her safe has grown into something personal and affectionate. But that doesn't mean I'm going to push her to return my feelings. Answering them or ignoring them is just one of the many freedoms Yumiko's finally managed to gain. JB's malicious provocation nearly drove me astray, but originally I hadn't even considered the possibility of making a move. Still, who knows what might happen down the road. If the two of us stay together, I'll probably get an answer to these feelings eventually. I want to put an end to this fugitive lifestyle as soon as possible, but there's no need for us to rush when it comes to figuring out our relationship. We trust each other. That should be enough for now. But not long thereafter, events took an abrupt and somewhat unexpected turn. Human beings don't act on the basis of reason alone. Soon I would gain a new appreciation for that undeniable fact. Desires are a natural part of life. Putting aside the basic cravings for food, sleep, and excretion that help keep us alive, there's a whole range of secondary urges that are at least possible to endure. Sexual desire is often called the strongest among these. Okay. As a fairly typical example of the male gender, I've got a fair amount of work to go around myself. My previous employer actually went out of their way to provide us ways to scratch this particular itch. However, when it comes to the female sex drive, my knowledge is somewhat spotty. It's long been said that men and women experience sexual urges that begin with puberty in very different ways. Okay, and I've interacted with a number of females who seem, at a glance, completely lacking in such desires. Sakaki Yumiko would be one such case in point. We've been living in one room for months now, spreading out our bedding only a few feet away from each other. But nonetheless, she's given every indication of viewing me as part of the furniture rather than a member of the opposite sex. It had been a long day on the job. After dinner, I went to bed a little earlier than usual. Yumiko didn't have anything in particular to do either, so she climbed in her futon at the same time and soon fell quietly asleep. I can't fall asleep tonight for some reason. Although Yumiko's already breathing quietly a few feet away, it's proving very difficult to nod off myself. After a while, I close my eyes and just pretend to sleep. There wasn't really any thought behind that. It's pretty common for me to have trouble sleeping, and sometimes this helps. No reason to disturb Yumiko by tossing and turning around either. But the young woman in question abruptly sits up, pulls back her blanket, and walks quickly off toward the bathroom. Yumiko returns quietly to the bedroom only a minute or so later. I lie quietly, wide awake, waiting for the sound of her slipping back into her futon. Which doesn't seem to be happening. What's this? For some reason, Yumiko doesn't seem too eager to get back in bed. I open one eye just a crack. She's standing expressionless in between our futons, staring fixedly down at me.
寝てるわね。
After muttering a question to no one in particular, Yumiko quietly lowers herself to the ground next to me, her legs splaying out to one side. What's this girl thinking? I decide to keep breathing softly and allow her to think I'm unconscious. Hypothetically, if she viewed me as an enemy or bore some grudge, this could be interpreted as the preliminary stage of an assassination attempt. I'm confident that's not the case right now. Yumiko definitely trusts me. That said, we're talking about a woman who tried to slap me in the face the first day we met, and spent a good amount of time attempting to stab me. That's in the past now, but she's definitely prone to expressing herself in violent ways. Just to be on the safe side, I focus my attention on Yumiko without opening my eyes, and wait alertly for her next movement. However, what comes next takes me completely by surprise. Yumiko swallows audibly, holds her breath, and something supple touches my lips. For a moment, I thought it might be your finger, but there's no way it would feel quite this soft. The instant I feel her breath on my nose, I realize that she's pressing her lips against mine. A sweet, distinctive scent tickles the inside of my nose. What the? Seriously? Unfortunately, I can't keep my lips from twitching a little. Yumiko instantly jerks back.
動いた。寝てるのに。
Yumiko stares down at me in an expression of absolute shock. I don't know what she was thinking, but if she's frightened enough to cut things off here, that's fine by me. Hopefully I'll be able to fall asleep soon. What, again? Once again, Yumiko presses her mouth against mine. And this time, she's a lot bolder about it. What is she thinking? Considering how things have been until now, this is just incomprehensible. I mean, if this were, say, Amane, Look at Yuji sleeping all peacefully. Brace yourself. Big Sis is gonna make sure you have some real nice dreams. Would probably be the thought process, but right now we're talking about Yumiko. It's hard to imagine she's got that sort of a sadistic streak, so why is she doing this? Maybe she's just curious? After months of living together intimately with a member of the opposite gender, Yumiko's developed an interest in sex. But the subject's too awkward to discuss, so she decides to try some furtive exploration. That's a very reasonable explanation. In fact, I almost hope it's true. Considering how badly Yumiko's unhappy past has weighed her down, seeing her act in such a human way would be something to celebrate. Might be a sign she's starting to break out of that defensive shell. Even as I'm pondering these matters, the girl continues to mash her mouth against mine in an increasingly ardent fashion. Guess I've got no choice but to call things to a halt somehow. Yumiko presumably believes I'm asleep and oblivious, but keeping up that charade at this point might give her the wrong idea. Normally speaking, anyone except the deepest of deep sleepers is going to wake up when someone's kissing them this intensely. Feel bad about interrupting, but for her sake and mine, the girl needs to learn what she's playing with fire. In order to defend my dignity, educate Yumiko, and prevent any unfortunate physical reactions, I reluctantly take action. Cut it out. Turning my face away from Yumiko, I forcibly tear our lips apart. Flinching with shock, Yumiko jumps away from me. Her eyes open to perfect circles as it finally dawns on her that she's taken things too far, her mouth's trembling uncontrollably. It's a pretty pitiful spectacle. She looks down at me with an uncharacteristic expression of absolute cowed terror, waiting to see how I'll respond to discovering her misdeed. Cut it out, Julia. Using every ounce of acting ability I possess, I continue mumbling in a sleep-addled voice. Seriously, Julia, save it for when we're awake, alright? I repeat the name clearly to make sure Yumiko catches it. And then I very obviously fall back asleep, or pretend so, too. It was a pretty crappy performance by any standard, but...
バレなかったのかしら。そうよね。明らかに私だと思ってなかったみたいだし。
At the moment, it's much more convenient for Yumiko to believe that I was talking in my sleep, so she easily accepts the charade. I can hear her let out a short sigh of what sounds like profound relief. It's obvious how shaken up she was by the experience. I can't help feeling a little guilty. But still, I had no idea Yumiko was interested in this sort of thing. Once again, I reflect on her sudden lapse of judgment. Her previous circumstances were abnormal enough that it wasn't always obvious, but Yumiko has desires like anyone else. Guess it might be time to think about her needs as well. I think this warrants a slight change in the status quo. Tomorrow I'll find the right moment and bring up the matter emotionally. No more indirect nosing around. It's an extremely dangerous gamble, but I also stand to gain a clear answer to that unresolved question from a few days ago. Yumiko lets out a sigh, overflowing with ennui, then burrows back under the covers of her bed. Sorry, Yumiko, and while I'm at it, sorry, Julia. With a few words of apology to my roommate and the long-suffering superior I just slandered unjustly, I return once again to my feigned sleep. Oh, I wonder how they are going to get along the next morning. I wonder how their feelings are going to develop. I'll wake up as if nothing happened and prepare breakfast for myself and Yumiko. I have off from work today, so there's no real need to get up at the crack of dawn, but I decided it would be best to create an opportunity for the two of us to talk as quickly as possible. I wonder how good these two are going to be together. Hey, no doubt thanks to her emotionally draining night, Yumiko seems a little languid this morning. She totters off drowsily toward the washroom and proceeds to splash water on her face for a while. Seems perfectly at ease, not a hint of tension in the air. In other words, she's convinced herself I'm unaware of the incident last night. Awfully carefree, aren't we?
いただきます。
Let's eat. Just as always, Yumiko chews the salt-grilled salmon with small, quiet movements of her mouth. Judging from her expression, she's completely off guard. Not that she has any reason to expect what's coming. Should I really say it? I'm still more than a little hesitant. When a man and woman live together without a clearly defined relationship, it's not surprising that tensions of this nature might arise. It'd be short-sighted to pretend last night never happened. I want to clear the air, and Yumiko was probably feeling some subtle awkwardness and guilt herself. That said, the last thing I need is for this to turn into some overblown drama. Alright, I think this calls for a very natural, casual approach. I choose my words carefully, aiming to keep this a light breakfast table chat. Hey, Yumiko.
何?
As Yumiko casually sips her miso soup, I ask my question in the most nonchalant tone of voice I can muster. You kissed me in my sleep last night, didn't you? She promptly chokes on her soup and begins coughing violently. I was thinking this might go smoother if I brought it up casually during a meal, but it seems that didn't work out so well.
それで何をその言いがかりバカにしてるの?
Yumiko flat out denies the truth in a desperate attempt to retroactively undo her folly. This isn't good. She seems to be getting somewhat emotional. But since I broached the subject, I can't allow her to squirm out of the discussion. Stealing my nerves, I push bluntly forward. Sorry, but I was awake the whole time.
何よしてないって言ってるでしょ?
a little after 11 last night, wasn't it? Lasted about 10 or 15 minutes after you came back from the bathroom. Yumiko quickly falters under my skeptical gaze.
したわよ。
And in a deeply mortified voice, she finally owns up to her misdeed.
したわよ、確かに。でもそれはあなたが呼吸してないような気がして。それで心配して、確認のために顔を近づけたら、
Completely flustered, she begins babbling incoherently. I'm tempted to ask if her conception of CPR is limited to repeatedly kissing someone, but this probably isn't the time to be mocking the girl. I stare Yumiko straight in the eyes, then gravely lower my head in apology. My apologies for not realizing sooner. Yumiko, it's not an excuse, but I genuinely had no idea you were so sexually frustrated. I bought into the stereotypes about women having lower libidos, convinced myself Amani was just an exception to the rule.
ちょっと待ってよ、待って。
Waving her arms about to signal a halt, Yumiko interrupts in an agitated tone of voice.
あなたひょっとして性欲に負けて私がああいうことをしたと思ってるの？
Well, from an objective point of view, I think it's the most plausible explanation. When someone who hasn't expressed any clear feelings for you suddenly makes that aggressive a move, I'm not sure what other conclusion there is to draw. But as I'm reviewing my reasoning, Yumiko's expression grows increasingly sour.
やっぱり全然気づいてなかったのね。
With a heavy sigh, she moves her shoulders up and down in an exaggerated shrug. In the next moment, Yumiko's body begins to tremble with something that seems suspiciously akin to rage. Hey, follow-up question. Was I just incredibly rude to you by any chance?
ええ、そうよ。もう持っていないけど、久しぶりにあれを出したいと思ったぐらいにね。
Come to think of it, we left that box cutter of hers behind when we ran away. Since Yumiko remembered that thing, it's clear that she's abnormally furious. And it's equally obvious where that anger is coming from. My cluelessness drove her straight into a corner. I stepped toward Yumiko and wrapped my arms around her without a word. Sorry, my bad, seriously. As I embrace her and apologize, she finally begins to settle down a little. I didn't bring this up because I wanted to mock you for having a healthy interest in the opposite sex, Yumiko. I wasn't sure if you had feelings for me, so I honestly didn't know what to do until now. Yeah, I finally got my answer. Yumiko's been hiding romantic feelings for me. I just wasn't observant enough to see them. My well-intentioned watch and wait policy ended up driving her to this humiliating moment. I've disgraced myself as a man. Since I finally understand, there's no reason for me to keep hesitating. Pulling slightly away from Yumiko's body, I stare straight down into her face. Yumiko, I love you. I want to make you happy. I also want to sleep with you. Sound like a plan? Yumiko closes her eyes and lets her shoulders slump limply downward. She heaves a long, long sigh, reminiscent of a balloon slowly deflating. Ow. And proceeds to slap me lightly on the cheek.
もう何よ勝手なんだから。
She's not crying or scowling, but there's a distinctly disgruntled expression on her face.
いきなり失礼なことを言い出したかと思ったら一転して今度は好きだ抱きたいだなんて無茶すぎるって自分でも思わないの？
My apologies.
本当にずるいのね。私が動くまでいつだってずっと待ってるばかりなんだから。
My sincerest apologies.
だから
At last, a mildly exasperated smile spreads across Yumiko's face.
私はもうあなたしかいないの。
And she reaches out once more, this time to offer me her hand. I take it and gently pull her body forward to lean against mine.
いいわよ。どうしたらいいのかわからないけど、風見くんになら。
Right. I feel the weight once again. Compared to when she's standing normally, holding Yumiko's slender body in my arms like this makes her seem extremely small. But inside that body, she's carrying all the loneliness of her past and uncertainty of her present. The more I think about it, the more absurdly heavy she feels. I'm ready for this. I wouldn't have been living with her in the first place if I wasn't. Still, I'm crossing a very serious line here, all the more so given her situation. Okay then, relax and leave everything to me. Yumiko answers my words with a small nod. Her voice conveys simple, absolute trust. That too adds to the weight upon my shoulders. Ah, yeah. Well, they're pretty cute. Bye.